This is Murder in the Morning with Tony Bruschi and Stacey Cole.
Imagine a courtroom where secrecy becomes the rule rather than the exception. That's precisely what's been happening in the case of Bryan Kohberger, the man accused in the November 2022 stabbing deaths of four University of Idaho students. Recently, the 4th District Judge Steven Hippler made it clear he's had enough of the excessive number of sealed documents being filed by both the defense and the prosecution, and he has emphasized that this level of secrecy, he's not cool with it. It contradicts the public's First Amendment right to know what's happening in their courts. His order, attorneys must take at the least restrictive approach necessary. Redact a few lines, use initials if needed, but stop sealing everything. Kohberger is charged with 4 counts of murder for the deaths of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves. The 4 students were brutally killed in the early morning hours of November 13th of 2022 at a rental home near their campus in Moscow, Idaho. When asked to enter a plea last year, Kohberger stood silent. Because he's on the spectrum, prompting the judge to enter a not guilty plea on his behalf. Was it a strategic move, or was it because he's on the spectrum? Because that's what they're going to try and argue right now. Prosecutors have already announced their intent to seek the death penalty if he's convicted. As the trial approaches, a wave of legal motions has been filed, many of them under seal. Surprise. One key motion from the defense argues that the death penalty should be taken off the table, citing Kohberger's autism spectrum disorder. The argument that executing someone with such a condition could constitute cruel and unusual punishment. Other sealed motions tackle issues such as whether the prosecution can use terms like psychopath or sociopath in court, as well as the presence of immediate family members during the proceedings. Judge Hippler has ruled that while some of these documents will remain sealed, others will be redacted and made public to strike the balance between transparency and confidentiality. Set to begin August 11th, 2025, and is expected to last more than 3 months. Given the intense media scrutiny, selecting an impartial jury will be a major challenge. Judge Hippler's push for a more open court process is an effort to maintain public trust while ensuring that a fair trial is there for all parties involved. As the legal battle continues to unfold, the families of the victims and the wider community remain hopeful that justice will be served. The court's approach to balancing transparency with due process will likely be determined as this case continues to go forward. The autism argument is interesting to me because it's a topic that most people don't get and don't understand. They think autism, that means you're like Rain Man or some shit like that,
Nope.
Or you're the head of Virgin. What's his name?
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson.
Is he on the spectrum? I didn't know that he was.
Yes. I mean, there's so many extremely. It can be a superpower. It can be a fucking superpower. Trust me, because I think I'm there, and I think I've used it as a superpower. It doesn't mean it debilitates, and it doesn't also mean that you don't know the difference between wrong and right.
Correct.
You may be kind of a wallflower. You may laugh at jokes that others don't find funny. You may get into things that in an obsessive way that others don't. But it doesn't mean you don't know the difference between right and wrong. That's the difference. That's where like psychopath and sociopath come into play, because both can be true at the same time. You can be on the spectrum and you can be a psychopath. It's not the spectrum that's making you not have any sort of remorse for what you've done or somehow justify it in your mind as being sane. That's the psychopath or sociopathic part of all of this. So I am curious as to see what is allowed into court in terms of those sort of terms, because they are arguable terms. They do have meaning. They get thrown out way too often where it's not the correct diagnosis for something. If somebody's crazy, somebody will say you're a psychopath, or if somebody's acting strange, that's a socio. Like, no, maybe, but you got to look at that. That's why a true diagnosis needs to be made. There should be some, I would hope maybe there'll be some maybe medical experts that come in, maybe an evaluation will be done on Kohberger to determine just what the hell is going on here. If he's already been diagnosed, then okay. I mean, he's there.
But it still doesn't dismiss what he allegedly did.
No.
And what you were just talking about, psychopath and sociopath, you know, it's real easy to throw that around like, oh, I went on a date with somebody and he was an absolute psychopath. You know, people throw that around. So if they use those words in court, they're going to have to define them in great detail, probably even taking a day with a psychiatrist or a psychologist coming in to describe exactly what the differences are, because a sociopath is completely different than a psychopath, but they're interchangeable in common vernacular.
They're not completely different. They share a lot of, that's incorrect. They are not completely different. They share a lot of the same tendencies. There's just a few that are different.
And thank you for clarifying that. Yes. But they overlap a little bit, but they're used interchangeably in society.
Yes.
And that's where a jury is going to get confused.
Well, it's why they can't go in there and just go, he's crazy. It's not
right.
Like here's, the dark triad of these terms, and here's what they mean. And here's how people act when they have this type of diagnosis, which, again, I would not be shocked if Kohberger could be diagnosed with something like that. I don't know. It's certainly they're trying to play all the cards that they can still. I mean, they're even arguing that the families shouldn't be in court because it could sway the jury, because it's going to put emotion on what's going on. Well, it should. They lost their kids.
Yeah.
And this is a guy whose knife sheath has his DNA on it that was under one of their dead daughters. It should be emotional. That should come into play. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't just be this weird guy sitting over here that seems to be very socially awkward, that thinks looking at the stars is a good alibi. It should be emotional. And they should be allowed to be there. And I think Hippler's not having any of it. So I expect the word psychopath or sociopath or definitions and evaluations to end up being a part of this case. It's a double-edged sword.
Interesting to see that.
It's a double-edged sword, though, if you do try and go and get him evaluated. Because you're going to get a very, super non-invasive evaluation. I mean, it does take some time to figure these sort of things out. A pattern of behavior needs to be there, and the evaluation does need to be kind of ongoing with this, because it could work against the defense or it could help the defense. I just find it interesting that this argument is being made right now, although you do have to make it before you get into trial for the sake of his own life. But the fact that we're going super hard on this right now, it almost just feels like, well, everything else really hasn't worked, so let's try and make you not a psychopath. You're on the spectrum. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's like they're trying to blunt the edges a little bit,
A little bit. When they know the edges are sharp and shitty, they're still trying to blunt them. And again, that's Ann Kohberger's.
Oh, there's a slip up.
Wouldn't that be something? After the trial, they get married. They fall madly in love, and it becomes a reality series.
Then I'm going to go find the edge of the earth, and I'm going to step off. I'm done.
Coming this fall to Netflix.
Want true crime coverage all day, every day? Press subscribe now to the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today, and get the latest cases delivered right to your feed.